What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to have another full-length interview. But if you're new to the podcast, just remember we got another couple episodes or shows within the show, if you will, where we have rants. I'll go on and kind of vent or discuss some hot topics on the industry, or maybe even call out some BS that somebody's maybe trying to do or say. And then we also have mental minutes. Those are those quick mental game hacks to help elevate your performance and stay in the zone. And then also deep dive educational explorations where we're looking at different zones of either training, zones of skill acquisition, zone of research, maybe a little bit stuff into injury history or anything else that you guys might want to have any topics on. You can send those in the zone podcast 123 at gmail.com. Or you can text below down here in the show notes. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Steven Rosier. He's the athletic trainer at West Virginia. What's going on, my man?
Not much. How you doing?
Dude, so pumped to have you on. I know we, again, initially connected on the mastermind with Armored Heat. So super pumped to kind of see what's to come from that. Already seen some really cool research articles and also give me some ideas for these future episodes too, which is pretty neat. Um, but yeah, just kind of tell the listeners a little bit of who Steven is, and we'll kind of break down the whole ins and outs of everything else as we go on.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, super excited to be on. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite. Who is Steven? Just I don't, I just consider myself a regular guy who loves baseball. Grew up playing it, originally from Minnesota. Wasn't nearly as good enough at the sport to continue playing it as these guys I work with are now. So found a field in sports medicine and athletic training where it gave me an opportunity to kind of connect my love with science and the human body to the sport and give back to the sport I love, and just kind of pursued that and wound up with a great opportunity here at West Virginia and just trying to run with it and make it the best it can be and give these guys the best care and resources that they can have.
Oh, I love it, man. I even remember my athletic trainer back in my college days, obviously D2 and stuff like that. So we didn't have the best resources for everything, but John was his name, and he did everything that he could to try to just basically help all of our guys do really well. So I think the unsung heroes, everybody knows about, the head coach, pitching coaches. No one gives the spotlight to the athletic trainers, man. And I think they definitely need it. So
Yeah, yeah. That's all right though. I always say I'd rather be behind the scenes and not knowing who I am. Usually if you know who I am, something's gone wrong.
yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Or you're just like sitting over there in the dugout and
Yeah,
chirping with you.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, man. I mean, I feel like that's how a lot of us start out in baseball, regardless of whatever it is, whether it's private sector, college, pro. A lot of guys that are in that mastermind, they're physical therapists, right? So a lot of them want to stay within or around sports. And so that's kind of like their next best thing, if you will. If it's not, playing, it's coaching or being around it in any facet that they can.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I think it's awesome, just it's a way, like I said, to stay around the sport, stay around something I love. I live and breathe baseball, so to get to work in it every day, it's like, is it really work or is it doing something I love? So, yeah, no, it's super awesome to connect with people and learn how many people like it's just genuinely what they love to do and they just found another way to stay around it. However that is, like you said, physical therapy, coaching, mental coaches, mental performance coaches, like all that stuff now is becoming so big. I think it's amazing for these athletes.
Oh yeah, they got more resources than we probably had combined
Yeah, no
on stuff,
kidding.
right? It's honestly crazy, but love to see the game grow in that direction too.
Yeah.
Um, but it kind of shift gears here a little bit as far as like, you know, athletic trainers. Like a lot of people, unless you've played, like you said, they're kind of behind the scenes. You don't really know a whole lot about them, but talk to us a little bit about those like zones of what the athletic trainer does. I know it's kind of all encompassing, and you're kind of almost a Swiss Army knife, if you will, right? Like you're
Yeah.
helping guys get ready, you're helping guys rehab, right? Like you're doing a whole lot of stuff and got to have a lot of tools in your tool belt.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Swiss Army knife is maybe the perfect way to describe the profession. When you go through school for it, you literally touch on everything from orthopedic evaluation and assessment to emergency trauma care to nutrition to sports physiology, exercise physiology, strength and conditioning. Um, you spend some time in sports psychology. So there's a realm of different things that you learn and study. Now, obviously, like as you go along, everyone kind of grows their niches and moves into different areas, but mainly, the big thing that we do is we care day in and day out for the student athletes, from the time they're injured to the time they return fully to sport and play. So, I think that's the part of it that I enjoy the most. You get to see guys from their lowest low, they're injured, they think their career's over, they've lost the sport they love. Some of them, right, wrong, or indifferent, identify with as themselves. And then you get to help them work back and to get them back out on the field and see the smile and the joy that that brings them. I don't think there's a better feeling in the world. Personally, in my opinion, having a guy return from whether it's a shoulder injury, an elbow injury, knee, whatever, and they come off the field and you get that hug like, hey, we're back. Like, thank you. That's pretty cool feeling. But
Oh, way
everything
better than
from
probably some of your own personal success, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just nothing better because, like I said, you've seen them through, seen them from the worst back to play, and a point where most of them think they're never going to get back. Sometimes. Now, those obviously are some of the more severe cases and injuries that we see, but then it's just the day-to-day treatment, care, helping these kids, these young gentlemen that are trying to become professional players, learn how to take care of their bodies, learn how to recover properly, set up. Thankfully, like I said, the resources we have here, we have a strength and conditioning coach, we have a nutrition coach, we have psychologists that work with our team. So like I don't have to wear all the hats.
yeah.
So being able to, help refer them to the right people in the right instances, is just another hat, right? You gotta kind of get that encompassing program going and have everyone pushing the wheel in the right direction, which thankfully here at West Virginia, like that support staff that we have in the sport performance medicine umbrella, however you want to classify it, I think is a great group of individuals, and we all have the same goal, and that's to help these athletes perform at the highest level they can.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and yeah, again, Swiss Army knife, man. Like you have to kind of be the bridge of all of those different disciplines.
Yeah,
Help, you know, let them know, hey, what's going on the field? Because the coach is only going to worry about the lineup and how guys are performing. Strength and conditioning coach is going to be like, hey, what's their readiness like? Nutrition is just focusing on that. But you're kind of seeing how all these are intertwining and just the overall general health and development of these guys, which
yeah,
it's pretty cool to see too. And, even from that perspective, and you're on the field with these guys pretty much every day, right? So,
yeah,
um, yeah, yeah. I mean, you're basically another coach essentially, but you're not calling any shots. You're just there to kind of
yeah.
help out.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think maybe the most fun part of the job that I didn't mention was, telling coaches guys can't play, right? Like,
yeah.
hey, sorry, this like we can't do this, but again, that comes with, the job. Like I tell my guys, my kids, recruits when I meet them, anyone when I meet them, my philosophy as the athletic trainer of West Virginia baseball is my job is to keep you on the field. But there's going to be a point in time that I have to make a decision that might pull you off the field, but I'm not doing that lightly, and I'm doing that with your future as a baseball player and as a human in mind, right? Because like baseball is only going to be around for so long, but I got to think about, man, you want to have kids and a family, you want to be able to throw a ball and run and play with your kids and grow up and have that life after baseball, and that goes has to go into my thought process as well. I'm not here for wins and losses. They don't affect, my job. Do I love winning? Absolutely. I want to win. But at the end of the day, that's not what I have to base my decisions off of.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But then also part of that too, and I think something that you could probably even help communicate as you're kind of talking with all the coaches is like, hey, like, you know, Jimmy over here, he's been running a lot of sprints, but he's had a couple, pulled hamstrings or stuff like that. That's where you can communicate to the strength coach, be like, hey, make sure we're doing some stuff here. But like just overall readiness, you're letting the athletes know that, or nutrition coach, you're like, hey, like so and so keeps having these. Maybe he's, cramping up or needs a little bit more electrolytes. Hopefully we can get him some of those. So you're kind of seeing the whole thing, the whole picture and how it all like I said, comes together, but you're able to communicate that versus, sometimes I think it's better now than whenever we were probably playing, but a lot of the athletes, may not know the best way to how to communicate that, or they don't really know, right? But
Yeah,
you can see them, you can like see him sprinting, and you're like, all right, dude, this is noticeably slower,
yeah,
right? You can tell
yeah,
he's letting up on certain things, but
yeah.
he's too much of a macho guy to kind of try to
Oh,
say he wants to play, he wants to keep
yeah.
going.
No doubt. I mean, that's what these kids do, right? Like I said, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, some of them identify it. That's what they are. They're baseball players. I don't think that's the right way for them to always look at it, but that's a whole nother story, right?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, when it comes down to wanting to play, these guys, like, man, you gotta. I think if their leg was hanging on by a string, they'd want to still play. So it is that kind of devil's advocate role, right? Like, yeah, yeah, sure, you can run around, but you don't look good doing it. You're risking hurting yourself. You're not going to help the team.
Yeah.
Um, I always get man, what are you doing here watching a bullpen at 6 p.m. when your day's over? And I'm like, well, the more I watch this guy throw on the mound, the more likely I am to catch when something's bothering him or he's not feeling good, right? Because all these pitchers have pitchers have little mannerisms, things they do in between pitches. And if I don't know what those are, I might think something is ailing them and they're not. Or I've had, at previous places I've worked and even here where a coach was like, hey, I think something's going on with him. He keeps doing this. I was like, no, he's done that. He's thrown 1,200 pitches this year and he's done that between every pitch. So, like, I'm not too worried about
Yeah. Right.
it.
Well, and to your point too, like maybe it's that 6 or 6:30 bullpen, whatever it is, it's super late. That could be someone that was just kind of put later in the pitching coach's list of pins, but he's making that return to throwing stint. That's probably the more important pin that you got to watch.
Yeah,
You know?
100%. Yeah, all of that stuff factors into it, right? Like, need to see these guys perform so that you know what they look like at their highest. And then there's times you're there for support and you're there to make sure, hey man, this is your first bullpen back since you returned from injury. Like, everything feels good. Like,
Mhm.
you get that immediate feedback versus the next day when they come in, they're like, oh, I'm sore. Well, okay, how'd it feel yesterday? Well, I don't really remember because now I'm really sore or tender, whatever it might be.
Yeah. That all they're focusing on is today. But hey, like
Yeah,
there's different kinds of soreness, right? There's like straight near the joint soreness and then like
yeah,
muscle soreness, two
yeah.
totally different things.
Totally different. I have a lot of conversations about that, and is it sore or is it an injury? Is it a normal soreness? Is it a new soreness? Where is it sore? How does it feel? So
Yeah.
that's
What other kind of common reoccurring conversations do you hear? Because I think in coaching we get that a lot too, or maybe it's like not necessarily with the same guy, but you see certain trends among certain things. Like what are maybe some of those other than like, of course, soreness, I think is probably one, but what else do you hear yourself
yeah.
kind of regurgitating a lot?
Soreness. A lot of especially early in the year when arms start ramping up, is a lot of like I just dead. It feels slow. It's not there.
Yeah.
Um,
I call that the Bermuda Triangle.
yeah, 100%.
Whenever your training is super amped up and your throwing is super amped up,
Yep.
and it's where a lot of
Yeah.
guys maybe might go tap out for a little bit, or if they don't prepare, then you're like, hey, this is a result of you not putting in the
Yeah.
work in the past couple
Yeah,
months.
100%. That's usually a big one. And then, a lot of times it's with the freshmen, it's that conversation of, man, my body hurts all the time. It doesn't feel good. I'm sore, my joints ache, my velo isn't what it was 3 months ago when I get before I got here. And it's that conversation of, hey, you're doing more now than you did. There's very few kids coming out of high school, that are throwing 12 months out of the year at a high level of throwing, lifting weights with a strength coach in a team setting, which is always different than one on one. You get competitive with each other. And then you're going through full blown power four baseball practice. And you're throwing, you could be from Florida moving to West Virginia. You're away from family. You have stress
Totally different
there.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah, you have stress with classes. Your classes are harder than they were in high school. Like there's a lot of factors that go into it. So it's helping them kind of figure that out, understand that part of it, and understand why we talk about in our program recovery and nutrition and sleep so much, because those things are important, and trying to eliminate stressors that don't need to be stressors, which is always easier said than done. But if you can figure out those little things, maybe it's making something as simple as writing out your class schedule each week. And that takes that stress of, man, what do I have going on today for classes out? And you're able to sleep better.
Oh
Or,
yeah.
having your homework checklist, working with our academic advisor who's amazing at her job and getting a homework checklist. Hey, this needs to be done by these times. And now you're eliminating things that don't need to be stressors, right? That aren't physical stressors. And a lot of times it's just helping them understand those kind of things and how to manage that time, how to be able to, take a deep breath and relax. On top of utilizing, like I've said, the resources we have for recovery, whether it's our sauna, cold, hot bath, Normatex. I mean, you name it, Firefly, you name it, we've got it. Like there's
That's
plenty of
awesome.
things. So, and then the nutrition aspect, some of those kids come in and all they eat are McDonald's burgers because they don't have mom and dad cooking anymore for them. So
Yeah.
thankfully, we got a good setup, and as they learn and figure that out, it's always funny to see as the year goes on, where it's like, oh hey, yeah, I changed. I'm starting to eat more, and my body feels better each day. And it's like, oh, that's easy. Maybe stop drinking 3 Mountain Dews a day and drink water instead.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Maybe you might feel a little bit better. You might perform a little bit better. Who knows?
yeah,
You never
who
know.
who knows? And it's funny when those things start to click, and you see it because it's like that light bulb comes on, and then it's like, oh no, I feel pretty. Just wanted to come say hi. I haven't seen you in a little bit because I feel good. And it's like, well, I mean, hey, no, good to see you. I'm glad I don't see you every day because it means you're
Yeah,
healthy
right.
and you're feeling good, right?
We're doing something right there, right?
Yeah,
Coming in and see me all the time. We got
yeah,
a problem.
yeah,
Well, funny you mentioned that though. And I'm not going to name his name, but we always had that one guy on the team that's quote unquote like a hypochondriac,
sure.
right? So how, I mean, again, I don't want you to name any names either, but how do you handle guys who, maybe on that side, or maybe they're just constantly getting injured, and
Yeah.
how do you be like, hey man, like you don't need to come in here and get an ice bath every day. You don't need to do this because if you're doing these things just to be ready to play each game, you're kind of digging yourself a hole to where it's going to be hard for you to play throughout the whole season.
Yeah, no doubt. I think I think that's a common thing in baseball, especially at this level. Especially, in programs that are consistent winners, and you have guys that are pushing, their goal is to play at the next level. So it's like, I need to do whatever I can all the time to be healthy, to play, to perform at my best. And I think, our strength coach does a really good job of like helping them understand that, like, hey, first day you stepped on campus is probably the last day you're going to feel 100%. Um, so it's kind of like helping them understand that. But then, I've got a ton of guys and that love any kind of soft tissue work they can get, and some of them would do it every single day if they could.
Yeah, sure.
Massage, cupping, needling, scraping. It's always like, hey, I want this, I need this, and it's fine. But there are times where, I have that conversation of, hey, if we just continually hammer this, whether it's you're coming in here to see me or you're rolling on a lacrosse ball, all we're doing is keeping that chronic inflammatory phase going. So I think some of that comes down to educating them,
Hmm.
and then just kind of having different resources and things that you could utilize. whether that's, some corrective type exercise or, hey, let's do some breathing exercises, kind of help reset you a little bit here, to kind of get them out of that phase. But I just think a lot of it comes down to educating them,
Sure.
helping them understand, especially, like you said, maybe the more the hypochondriac or the like, I need something every day. It's like helping them understand that, if we keep draining the gas tank and we keep pulling things, we're never going to get back to full. So I've got a whiteboard in my office, and I've got stress recovery cycles written on it almost once a
Oh,
week,
yeah.
explaining to guys like, hey, I'm glad you want this stuff, but sometimes the best thing that you can do for it's not even sometimes, it's the science, the best thing you can do to recover is go eat food, hit your macros, hydrate, and sleep 9 hours a night. Like that's what your body needs to recover. We can do all this other stuff. That's just icing on the cake,
Yeah,
right?
those are the biggest, performance enhancers out there is the
Yeah,
sleep, quality food,
yeah,
just
and
letting your body rest and recover.
yeah, and it's great because we have performance staff meetings between myself, our nutritionist, our sports and clinical psych, and we talk about these things. So it's a consistent message from everyone, right?
Yeah.
That helps. That helps. It's not good if I'm saying one thing being contradicted here, they're being contradicted there, right? Like our nutritionist talks weekly throughout the fall about different tips and things, and he'll always start the first talk of the year is he'll put it up there legal performance enhancing drugs, and he asks everyone what they think they are, and it's protein and creatine and fish oil and this, and he just goes hitting your macros, being hydrated, and sleeping. And so it's just helping them understand those things.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, and the big one that I'm sure that they probably mentioned too, but something I always kind of mentioned to some of the guys, and again, to each of their own on certain things, but like dipping or like having some type of chewing tobacco and alcohol, if you're always constantly rolling out, those things also have an effect on your tissues as well. Right?
Yes,
Like that's what's going to keep it a little bit more rigid and less pliable, less
yes,
less fluid in there, right? So if you're doing those things, you got to know like, hey, this is why you're always tight, why you're
yeah,
always probably
yeah,
having all that's everywhere.
100%. I've sent just to our group, our baseball group, I've sent, statistics and research information on that stuff where it's like, hey, I know you guys, you do it. It's like it's part of baseball culture, right? Like it has been for 150 years or more, whatever it is. It probably to some degree always will be, but like understand what you're doing to your body. Like you're not helping your body perform, right? And like you said, I mean, our nutritionist touches on all that stuff, and
Oh yeah,
it's great. So it makes life easier when you've got a bunch of people in the same realm with the same mindset, and we stay on the same page.
absolutely. Well, and another one too that I think it's not necessarily overlooked. Like everybody knows it. People are be like, "Oh, hey, this is arm candy." You have like a full little bottle of like ibuprofen or
Yeah,
whatever else
yeah,
is in there. I'm like, I actually prided myself going through my college career to not really using those unless I absolutely had to. And I even recall not even using, icy hot until or whatever Tiger Balm and that type of stuff until like my very last series in a regional championship because I was throwing like 4 days in a row as a relief.
yeah,
It was insane for one, but two, I was like, I needed it then. So that's going to have a lot more of an effect
100%.
because I didn't do it all the time. I didn't have to go from like four to then like take 10 and then I'm crushing my liver and everything too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have that talk specifically with our pitchers every year. You hear, like you said, arm candy or Skittles, and I'm like, man, I don't even want to know. Like, I
Yeah,
know you're
I'd
not
rather not
reaching
know.
into your bag to grab a handful of Skittles, right? But yeah, that's the
Real
conversation I
quick.
have. It's like, what are you guys doing wrong in other areas, or what are other things that we can address, whether that's nutrition, hydration? It could be as simple as just getting stronger in the weight room,
Yeah,
um,
it's very true.
right? Like maybe we need to sit down and watch video and clean up a mechanical flaw. But you shouldn't be relying on ibuprofen, Tylenol, whatever that is, BioFreeze, Tiger Balm, Red Hot
You're
for
doing
your
that
arm.
every single time you're going out. You're doing something wrong for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'll usually ask guys that they'll come in and, hey, you have any Tiger Balm? And be like, what do you need Tiger Balm for? Oh, just to get my arm going today. Well, what do you mean? Why isn't your arm going today? What does that mean, right? Like, are you doing this because you're throwing through pain and you're trying to be a tough guy? Um, are you doing this because you think you need to do it? Like, did you do the proper things to warm up prior to throwing? Oh, you haven't even gone out and done your pre-throw care yet? Oh, so you just assume doing that isn't going to help. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
those conversations are always, happening, and it's how do you stop it? How do you keep it out? Because, I mean, I ask my guys not to take their own ibuprofen, but I come at it as the realm of like, what happens if something happens and you're in an ambulance and they need to give you medication, and I don't know, you've taken a
Yeah.
1,000 milligrams of ibuprofen and they put something that you can't be on when you're on ibuprofen. Um,
Mhm.
so I go that route just to stay out of the arguments of, well, I want ibuprofen, so just in case I need it if we're traveling and I have a headache, because that's where it's always going to go. Um, and I tell them like I
That's
mean
right.
we travel with it. I carry it everywhere we go. I'm like, if you need it and you have a legitimate reason to need it, other than I just want to take it before I throw so I don't feel anything. Because that's, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that one.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll give it to you, but if you walk up to me and you say, "Can I have ibuprofen?" and I say, "What do you need it for?" and your answer is, "I just want it before I throw, so I don't have to feel anything," my answer is going to be no.
Mhm. Yeah,
Like,
'cause you're
that's not the
that's
right
digging
reason to
yourself a
take
hole.
it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, those are always interesting conversations, and
Tough
difficult.
conversations though
Yeah,
too, right? And
yeah,
that's where you needed that kind of psych background and probably why you could talk a little bit to maybe the sports psych guys is like, hey, like if you've maybe before you came, you were at a junior college or whatever, and that's how you got ready to perform. It's like maybe you need to learn how to go
yeah,
without or maybe less, right? Like maybe don't
yeah.
take 4 or 5, like maybe if you just have one, right? I don't think there's necessarily like a withdrawal phase from it, but
Yeah.
you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, there's tolerance to it, right? Like if
yeah,
you're
absolutely.
consistently on 500 milligrams, eventually like you're not going to feel a difference, right? Because it's
Mhm.
just there. But yeah, and that's a conversation in today's world that like people, I think, not only myself, but I'm sure across the country and in college, all of college athletics, with the transfer portal and how often people are transferring now. Conversations you have to have, because we get guys from, JUCOs, mid-major, low-level D1s that transfer in here after having a good career there, and they want a shot at, this, and it's like, well, I didn't have these resources, like, and
Yeah.
it is unfortunate that not every place has the same resources for these student athletes. That's a whole nother tangent we can go down another
Yeah,
day.
for sure.
But yeah, and sometimes like you said, you come from a JUCO and they're like, well, we have one athletic trainer that works with every sport that we have and never
Yeah.
travels, and I never see him unless we maybe once for a home game. And it's like, yeah, my body aches, my arm hurts, but I got to throw because I'm trying to get that D1 offer. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm taking ibuprofen, and it's that conversation of, okay, that's how it used to be. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. So let's figure out what is going on, and let's do the right things. It doesn't mean you can't throw.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean we can't use medicine to aid us, right? There's a reason we have it. But let's do the right things to fix the root cause so it's not a thing you have to depend on.
No doubt. Yeah, the dependency, I think, is really the biggest issue, right? Like,
Yeah,
not the fact that you're taking it, like you shouldn't shame yourself for, needing some of these things, but if you're depending on it all the time, right, regardless of whatever it is,
yeah,
it's something that, I could even flip that to on the performance side of like, hey, do you absolutely need to do, a Theragun or do all these plyo ball routines and stuff for you to be able to throw? Honestly, no, especially as a relief guy, you got to just be ready to do a couple arm circles and let it
No
rip, man.
doubt.
Like you
Hey,
gotta,
get hot. Get
yeah, you
hot.
gotta
That
release
doesn't,
some of that
yeah,
dependency of needing all that stuff.
yeah, get hot. That doesn't mean start throwing a plyo ball. That means
No.
you get on the mound and get that thing. Yeah, no doubt. And I agree wholeheartedly on that. Like it's the dependency side of it. I've got no problem with the guy needing to take some or asking to take some um, once in a while here and there, but the everyday thing, the I gotta have it or I can't do it.
Mhm.
Uh, like you said, that's not just Tylenol and ibuprofen. That's
Yeah.
Theragun, that's Tiger Balm, that's plyo ball, band routines. Like at some point, there's going to come a point in time that you don't have the time or can't
Mhm.
depend on that, and you just gotta get going.
Oh, for sure.
So let's figure out ways that we can do that. How do we do that? What works best for you? Let's try to make it what works for you and not a generalized what works for, what we think should work for everyone, right?
No, exactly. Well, to be honest, this may be complete ignorance on my side, but as far as like NIL deals go, I don't know if they have these things where they're going to have to play a certain amount of games in order to get a certain amount of money. Maybe that's true, and some of them, and again, it's probably dependent on who signs what. Um, but people romanticize a lot of like good example back in our era was like the Kurt Schilling bloody sock, playing through injury, which
Yeah,
isn't always the case. But like, hey, if you're in the World Series, like, dude, yeah, or
yeah,
the ALCS, like you can be a dog, right? But
yeah,
that's like very few and far between.
yeah. Like,
People see that, but at the same time, it's like those dudes are getting paid more if they push their bodies to do that, and that's their profession, and it was a probably wise choice to do that. But when you're in college, maybe unless you're in Omaha or on the road to Omaha, I don't know. There's probably like a tug of war conversation that you probably have with some of these guys as far as the risk reward,
yeah,
like maybe that time frame versus, hey, you're at the second series at the beginning of the season. Now's not the time to really push anything.
yeah. No doubt. It's it's a game of tug of war. That's probably a good way to put it. It's a game of how much is too much, how much is too conservative, how much is too aggressive. And it does weigh in a factor of things. And a lot of it just starts with the conversation with the player, right? Like, sure, if we're in Omaha in a national championship series game three, and you're telling me, hey, I don't care, I'm playing. This thing hurts, but I can play with it. I'm gonna say, all right, let's do whatever we can to make it hurt so you can perform, like hurt less so you can perform at the highest level that you
Right.
can right now, right? Um, versus, yeah, there's been times in the last 2 years here at West Virginia, it's weekend number two of not, the season, which is a non-conference weekend, and somebody's got a little ailment where it's like, okay, yeah, if we're in the middle of Big 12 season or the back end of Big 12 play, and you're telling me you can play through this, we're probably gonna play through it. But right now, let's get you 100% so when we start Big 12 play, we're healthy, you're healthy.
Hmm.
Uh,
Or as
and
close as that 100% as you can be.
yeah, yeah, right. We're in season, it's just all about managing it. How do we get it back to 100%? It's tough. I mean, you're probably not going to get there until you're completely done playing with for the year, without a total shutdown,
Right.
which
Still set you back even further.
yeah, yeah, right. That's going to set us back. You're going to miss more time. So it's a game of tug of war. It's a game of, I that's where my knowledge and my training and years of experience I got to rely on, understanding the injury, what the injury is, how it's prevalent to the sport, what are the risks of uh, making the injury worse, what are the risks of playing with this injury, what could it lead to, and then it comes down to, can they perform, right?
Hmm.
Can you go out there and do what you need to do, as the player that you are to play this game, to help the team, to be productive, but also to be able to protect yourself. So if you can't do those simple things, like it's just the conversation of, hey, let's take this day by day right now. Maybe we don't play today, and we do more treatment. We do some things on the side, and we see how it feels tomorrow, and we go from there. Um, but there's a lot of things that weigh into it, right? And some of it, like I said, my job isn't about wins and losses or relying on it, but some of it does depend on the time of the year, right? If a kid tells me they can go more times than not, unless I have a specific reason or concern about further injury, um, late in the year, I'm going to let you go. I I usually might have now I might have a conversation with coach where it's like, hey, he wants to go, he can go. He's probably playing at 85%. Um, I'm okay with him going, but I think it's better for him and for us the rest of the way if he maybe doesn't go.
Sure.
Um,
Oh yeah. Well, now would be probably a perfect example. And I'm sure a lot of other coaches are agreeing with me on this. If especially right now when they go home, you can't really oversee everything. It's kind of the most dangerous part
yeah,
ramping up into the spring season because you're like you don't know if they're sticking to the plan or to go out and play, backyard football or pick up
yeah,
basketball
yeah,
on ankle or whatever, and you're like, okay, well, that sets us back a little bit. But
yeah,
if something like that happens, right, and they're coming up on the season, let's say, you know, little bit of a strain or rolled ankle, something, relatively minor that they could get back. It's like, hey, do we push them back and maybe don't let them be available those first couple series in order for them to be 100%? I would think, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Would you rather someone, continue to ramp up and go through it and maybe push back a couple weekends or just hey say, hey, like they want to start, they want to get, up on the opening day roster, but then they end up having more setbacks. You know,
yeah. No,
conversation.
you're spot on it. 100%. I will say Christmas break and summer ball when guys head off to that, anytime I see one of their names, whether it's a text message or a phone call pop up on my phone, I hold my breath because all I can think is, oh man, what just happened? What am I up against? But if that, things happen, right? It's life. We're all humans. Things are going to happen. Injuries are going to happen. But yeah, if we had a guy go home over winter break, hamstring, quad, muscle strain, whatever it is, ankle sprain, something like that, and they come back and it's always kind of a rough look at the timeline. What do you look like now? How are you moving? How's it moving? Where are we at? What can and can't we do? That kind of helps you lay out the timeline.
Mhm.
And then conversations with the student athlete, right? I always tell them, I'm like, just give me your most ideal timeline. Like, give it to me. And most of them, well, I'll be healthy next week. Well, okay, let's be realistic, right? Um, but yeah,
Giving them
it's
a little
that.
dose of reality too. You're like, hey, like it's probably gonna take you 4 or 6 weeks to bounce back.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
have
and I
4 weeks
I
till that.
always tell them, I'm like, hey, you're gonna hate me when I say this, but it's probably gonna be 6 weeks before you feel 100% or whatever 100% is this time of the year, right? But yeah, if we're rolling up to the season and it's like I got a guy who's like borderline, like I could probably play him or let him play without a lot of concern. Um, but if we take 2 more weeks, we can roll into the rest of the year 100%, not having any little aches and pains coming from it playing, not worrying about it swelling up or taking a wrong step and rolling over an ankle again or a hamstring being extremely sore from returning and playing a full game when they haven't necessarily had that load or stress. I'm gonna take that 2 weeks to get them there. We had a last year we had a pretty big name player go down third game of the year with a pretty nasty hamstring injury, and he probably could have returned miraculously. This guy heals like Wolverine at probably about 4.5, 5 weeks,
Wow.
but we took I think he returned at like 6, almost right on the dot. Um, because we had that conversation where it's like, yeah, sure, you could, but you're not ready for it if you want my honest answer, right?
Sure.
You haven't done the load.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a thing there, and especially something that you probably are solely in is that, whether it's return to throw or return to 100% of from a hamstring injury and then return to play, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm 100% physically able to move around and do
Mhm.
things. But like, and I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. Like, what are some of those checkpoints that you guys maybe look at? Just like, hey, he hits this and he hits this after this time. Maybe not always a time frame, but like maybe they can expedite that timeline because he did, X amount of sprints with, you know, whatever it might be, or maybe it's
Yeah.
throwing X amount of times with no soreness, or kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no doubt. The one thing I always tell guys coming back from injury, whether it's, just like an acute ankle sprain, muscle strain, something like that, that's short term or it's a long term surgical one, is I try to help them understand like there's a difference between I call it return to sport,
Yeah.
and return to performance, right? So like return to sport for a surgical guy is like you're playing baseball again, right? You're hitting, you're throwing off the mound, you're playing baseball. But a return to performance is like you finally feel like you're the player you were before the injury, or better, or
Yeah.
slightly, whatever. But you feel
Maybe the
like,
confidence isn't quite there, but you're
yeah, like I had a kid this fall coming off of TJ, and he came in one day and he walked in, he's like, dude, I'm back. And I was like, what? And he's like, it's back. I feel like myself again out there. And
yeah.
this was about, I think it was about 14 and a half months post-op. And he said, you told me it was probably going to be 14 to 16 months before I felt like that. And I was like, so it's that part of it. I try to help them understand too, because there's a difference between return to playing, return to performance.
Oh yeah.
Um,
And great example too, because I think that's where the biggest gap, like sometimes whenever you have the minor injuries that you don't really have that distinct transition of return to play, return to sport, or
yeah,
but
yeah,
when you're throwing, it's like, hey, I'm back at 100%. And I got a horror story for you on this one. Not going to name the coach or the player, but he was at a high level D1, right? And he was coming back from a labrum surgery. He was like, 80% throwing intensity, not just on the mound yet. So again,
yeah,
kind of differentiate. He's at 80% throwing intensity. Coach comes over here, starts MFing this guy, said, you're, all the choice words. Like, dude, just like nut up, let's go.
yeah,
Right. And throws him on the mound, and he's like, you got to throw this max effort. Like, come on, come on. Because he was trying to push him to expedite and help him get ready faster. And sure enough,
right,
he airs it again. He goes from having 7 anchors to then 6 more anchors, so 13 anchors total. Just absolutely
yeah,
brutal. So, needless to say,
yeah,
I've lost all respect for that coach. Whenever I heard that, I was like,
yeah, yeah. Me
just,
and that coach would not get along well. Um,
no.
Thankfully, the coaches here are pretty in tune, and they trust, myself and our strength coach talk a lot about these things as guys are coming back to, and we develop plans between the two of us, so that all helps. But back to kind of the original like benchmark type things, right? I'll just use like the classic because it's one of the most common injuries in baseball, if not the most common, a hamstring strain, especially among position players, right? Um, so just kind of restoring range of motion. We need to have full comparable range of motion. And then there's some exercises in rehab that I'll progress them through that, like, you need to be able to hit this exercise for X amount of reps. So, like, one that's an easy example that I use a lot is like a hamstring eccentric slider. So, like an eccentric hamstring curl.
Yeah.
We're going to
Got to
start double.
progress from,
Yeah, so we're going to start double leg. And when you're able to do 3 sets of 12 repetitions without pain or a pain level below 3 or 4, which obviously that's subjective to them.
Mhm.
Once you've hit that, we're going to progress you to a single leg eccentric hamstring. Um, and we're going to it's not 12, but we might be 6 to 8 reps now we're looking to hit with that pain level. And then we're going to start progressing back into the weight room. And then we run sprints on timed gates. So when we've hit the strength part where it's okay, we're doing Nordic hamstring curls, we're busting out our handheld dynamometer, we're testing hamstring strength, and with knee flexion, we're testing it with hip extension, and our numbers are matching up. And we can look at it and say, okay, you're strong. We have the strength that we need. Now we need to build the volume, the intensity, the sprint metrics back up.
Yep.
Uh, let's get the gates.
Those checkpoints that they're getting to before they get back onto the field, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's checkpoints. Like we're hitting this. These are all moving us in the right direction, and they kind of changes the rehab plan and stuff as we go and we hit those benchmarks. It changes what they're able to do in the weight room, right? Like once we hit that single leg eccentric benchmark, and you've been doing double leg RDLs in here with my 40-pound kettlebell that ain't doing nothing to you anymore. Well, let's get in the weight room where they got heavier weight and let's start going, right?
Yeah, challenge
So
it.
some of it's just like, hey man, I don't have the weights to challenge you anymore in here, so let's use your strength and conditioning session as that.
Mhm.
Uh, and
Have
then
you
when
have
it's
you looked at the just out of curiosity, have you seen Franz Bosch's hamstring
yeah,
strength protocol?
yep, yep,
Really like that one, to be honest. I haven't used all of them, but I had
yeah,
to train myself and actually used a lot of the isometric holds, and I was like, wow,
yes,
it's
yeah,
actually really,
yeah,
really good and kind of expedited some things for me.
yeah. I like it a lot too. I've looked at that one. I've looked at a few different ones that are out there and kind of like almost like melting potted it
Oh yeah, that's the
kind
best
of
way to
right.
do it, right? You come
Yeah,
up with your own way.
yeah. So I used to like hardly ever use isometrics.
Now it's like
I just
everything.
thought they were like, oh yeah, just you're in a sling, you're in a brace, like it's the only thing we can do right now. When I tell you, my guys are like, dude, I swear I'm so sick of doing isometrics. Sometimes I think I do them too much now.
ISOs, yeah.
Um,
Oh man,
but
I'm right there
they've
with.
they've proven to be highly effective for me since I've started integrating them even into guys that are 6, 7 months post-op injury. But yeah, so then it's like, let's get out on the field and we're going to go through, a controlled dynamic warm up. We're going to move on the side. We're going to get moving. We're going to start probably with some like tempo runs. So we start building some volume back up. I'll usually start with like a 60-yard tempo, really easy. Like, hey, they usually run them in like 9, 10 seconds here when they're conditioning. So I'm like, hey, we're going to run it in 16 seconds. Like, I really just want you to feel movement again.
Mhm.
And then we slowly take those down, and then it gets to the point where it's like, all right, we got to start sprint work, right? So the nice thing is we've got the Vald laser time gates. So we've got all of their times. So I'll usually go through and I'll pull that up and I'll find their all-time average on a fly 10 or a 10 yard acceleration. We'll get their all-time average and then I'll get their PR. What's the fastest you've ever run and what's your average time? And then we'll use those benchmarks where it's like, okay, maybe your fastest fly 10 is a 1-1. Um, we want to be at 70% of that today. So we'll do the math and I'm looking for you to run a 70%, I don't know, like a 1-8, whatever that math comes out to. I'm not a math whiz. I use a calculator. I can't just do it off the top of the dome. But we're going to hit that. Okay. We're going to hit 1-8. We're going to do it for, a few reps. We're going to build some volume and then we're just going to keep working our way down closer. I usually around the 90 to 95% when they hit that is when I'm kind of like, okay, I'm good with you playing.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
because we're hitting not quite maybe a max sprint, but we're at a point where you can sprint and play. And
Mhm.
we've done so many sprints to this point that the volume's built up, the intensity's built up. We're just going to keep, and it might just be like hey, if it's the top of the second and nobody's on base and you hit a ground ball the second, we're not expecting you to run your fastest 90 to first base because we don't need that to pop right now. Like we're going to be smart.
Oh, for sure. You just tell them like,
So
hey, like don't max
yeah,
effort if you got
yeah,
the ground ball and you're trying to
yeah.
beat up the first, like don't be a hero.
and coaches, coaches, you go to him and you're like, hey man, he can play, but he's probably only playing at 90%. Well, him playing at 90% is good with me. And I'm like, all right, as long as like,
As long as they know that. Yeah. No,
yeah, yeah, as long as you know that. And I always try to kind of make it like their decision, right? So it's like,
mhm.
hey, I gave you the facts. You think you can play at 90%? I'm telling you, I'm good with it. So then they feel like they had some, say in it, and it keeps that relationship. But yeah, so
Well, and
ideally, I
pushing
would
them to
love,
maintain that too. Like
yeah,
sprints is one thing where, especially throughout the season, you want the guys to stay 100%, but you also, on the training side, like strength coach be like, hey, we got to make sure we're getting some max effort,
yeah,
full speed sprints sprinkled in there as much as we
yeah,
can.
yeah, prime those
We're
hamstrings,
not
hit
getting
top
in.
speeds a lot. Um, and then it's part of it, part of the how many sprints, how much volume do I want to build depends on position they play. Outfielders obviously is going to be more.
Sure.
Shortstop, middle infield is going to be more, but like a first
Corner
baseman,
guy, probably not. Yeah.
yeah, corner guy can probably do about half the amount. So it's it's an imperfect science, I think, is what I would call it. Um,
Mhm.
Ideally, in a perfect world, we'd have GPS monitors, like all the
Yeah.
soccer players do. But I know there are some schools I've talked to that have them, and that would be an amazing resource. And I think it's on mine and our strength coaches list of things we want, because then you've got all kinds of data, right? You've got sprint distance, like you've got everything you need to make sure they're performing at what they need to perform at coming off of something like that.
No doubt. That's a great way to kind of regulate their readiness or how well
Yeah.
they're returning back.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a huge game changer for you guys, no doubt.
Yeah. So it's just having benchmarks like that. You gotta, again, it comes down to the resources you have, right? Like if I don't have the Volt timing gates, it's probably a lot harder to know, are you actually hitting 80% of your top sprint speed, or
Mhm.
not? So that part of it helps. Um, when it comes to throwing, we use a lot of, especially like rehab throwing guys. We have a lot of, when you're throwing and you're building up, we have velocity ranges at different distances,
Mhm.
mostly based off of Dr. Meister's throwing protocol. I mean, why wouldn't you use those if you've got them? That guy looks at more elbows in a day than anyone ever has looked at.
Oh, I'm sure.
Um, but yeah, so we use those benchmarks. A lot of it's, wellness exams. How's your arm feeling today? What are you doing?
Mhm.
We utilize armcare.com and their platform,
Oh
which
yeah, the
which
strength
allows us,
monitor.
yeah,
Yeah,
which
I gotta
allows us
say,
to,
remind me to send you the ebook that I have on that on a few
okay,
tests that I run, and then I had
yeah,
a case study with a guy coming back from TJ, how I use
okay,
that for like readiness and stuff. So
yeah,
shameless plug to all of you out there. The ebook's going to be launched here soon. Probably by the time you're listening to this, it should be already launched. So
awesome. There we go. There we go. Got it out there to the world.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, utilizing that, so we know that the strength is there, the grip strength is there,
Range of motion too. Yeah.
range of motion, yep. Making sure we hit those benchmarks. I think those are good benchmarks to have, that they utilize, and the data is great, right? To just be able to do a 2-minute test and have all that data is absolutely electric in my mind. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
love it. I
You guys
know.
have multiple of those devices and you just get everybody to run through it pretty quickly.
Yep, yep.
Nice.
So that helps us a ton. But then it's, like to get out of the training room and into throwing, I need to see you perform throwing type movements without issue.
Hmm.
Not necessarily that we're going to say, well, you got to throw this ball before you can go out here and throw it there, but we're going to go through, upper body plyometric, med ball throws. We've got, I've got like a 6 week for my surgical guys plyo program for the upper body that will work through, guys with less will kind of figure out, okay, how much time have we missed? And this is where we're going to start with that. But we're looking for high volume plyometric work. And when you can handle that and you can come in the next day and your arm feels good, you don't have pain, you're not sore, we'll run through some quick exam clinical exam stuff. What used to light you up? What used to bother you when I first looked at you and you were injured? Does that still bother you? No, cool. Your strength is back. All right, we're going to hit this arm care test. Let's compare it to your previous data. All
Mhm.
right, sweet. All your numbers are where they need to be. You feel good. Now it's kind of like dependent upon, again, I'm big on time missed is about the amount of time we need back to
Yeah,
build up
same.
throwing. So
Absolutely.
if if it's been 2 weeks, then we're going to do 2 weeks of build up before. Um,
Build up, and then that's the return to back to 100% too.
yeah, correct. Yep, yep. We're going to use 2 weeks to build up and get off the mound towards the middle of that second week, end of that second week, and then if all things go well there and you're meeting the parameters within the velocity ranges we're looking for, and your arm feels good, we're gonna work you back in as able. And like it's a little tricky because the collegiate level, right, is different than like the professional level where you've got
Hmm.
162 games. If you miss 6 weeks as a starting pitcher, you miss what, maybe 12 starts, 10 starts. You miss 6 weeks at this level, you miss almost a quarter of the season at that point in games. So it's like I said earlier, it's just an imperfect science. I think you kind of got to figure out what metrics and things work well for you,
Hmm.
things that you trust, things that you've seen work. And I've kind of continued to build and try to learn. And like we talked about the mastermind armored heat thing, like try to pick these guys' brains who are a lot smarter than I am and go from there. So I think that's kind of how I handle and work through some of those things.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, Steven, dude, I feel like that's all the questions that I had for you. But you got anything else that you want to touch on, or maybe how guys can get in touch with you if they're maybe having some questions on maybe certain injuries if they don't have those resources, coaches, or maybe even former players that are looking to maybe get into athletic training, where can they reach out to you and talk to you?
Yeah, sure. So I have a Twitter account. It's S Rosier, my last name, which is Rosier 20. You can reach out to me on there. It's public, so you should be able to send me a message. Um, my Gmail account is basically the same thing, srosier20 at gmail.com. Feel free to shoot me something on there. Instagram, same exact name. I make it really difficult. But yeah, feel free if you have a question on something I said or want to talk or you heard something and you think of it a different way, or someone has a different opinion or thought, or hey, have you ever tried this? I'm open. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to make sure we're on top of it and on the forefront of things here, so our guys are healthy and performing at their best. I'm all ears. I love talking shop with people. I love learning things from people, and I hope maybe I can teach somebody something or help
Yeah, I
them.
hope so. And get some value out of this, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That love it. Well, Stephen, thanks again. Appreciate your time, my man. I know you're just wrapping it up your day here. So again, appreciate you again. And for those of you listening, stay in the zone.